Welcome back inside the Parc Fermé. Great to have you here. You know who this is. This is Todd.
No, Todd, not now!
AKA Negative Camber. You know why I've asked you here.
You must convince the villagers that I'm harmless.
That's exactly what I need you to do tonight for your kind consideration for podcast number 725. It is the Bahrain Grand Prix review. What I should say is welcome back to the Formula One season of 2021. I'm awful darned excited, and I'm really excited to introduce my my co-host. Yes, you know him, you love him, all the way down in the Dallas-Fort Worth area where he plies his skills as the sporting manager for the Aston Martin number 23 Heart of Racing team. Whew, you know who he is? Of course you do. It's Paul Charsley. Paul, how you doing?
I'm doing good. And I did talk to the villagers yesterday, and
what'd they say?
They're becoming a little suspicious.
They're
saying,
yeah.
why do they keep telling us that he's harmless?
I know, I know. Well, they're going to be up here with
a little old, yeah,
pitchforks and torches here pretty soon.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
That's how the villagers roll, man.
There was a couple outside on my door actually after
that's good.
Last week's podcast. They weren't that impressed.
Did they burn your box?
Yeah, yes, they burned my couple box. So get on with it and be more entertaining.
That's right. You need to be more animated, Paul.
I don't know. I'm going to start juggling. I don't know what to do.
Do a little more arm waving, maybe.
Yes.
That'd be good for you.
Waving.
That'd be good. So, to Paul, I would normally ask you all kinds of culinary insight and beverage insight, but I don't have time for any of that crap.
No, there's a race to talk about.
There's a race to talk about, and there's a lot. There's so much to talk about. We're going to jump right into the Bahrain Grand Prix. Yes, as I told you, Formula One is back, ladies and gentlemen, in 2021. First race of the season in Bahrain. Seems like just yesterday we were in Bahrain. We were. And that was the first race of the season after the Australian Grand Prix was delayed until later in the year. So Bahrain hosting the first Grand Prix. Heading into the Grand Prix, certainly lots of questions remained around Mercedes and the challenging test that they had. Is Mercedes, sandbagging? Are they, really slower than Red Bull? Is Red Bull faster? We're all asking these questions. At this point, we're all walking around asking each other,
Where is Jessica Hyde?
That's exactly what we're asking. So we are going to answer that because it unfolded in Bahrain. The key elements for this race really boiled down to some of these bullet points that I've expertly crafted for your digestion. The Bahrain Grand Prix reduced itself to a real tire battle between Red Bull's Max Verstappen, who started from pole, and Mercedes driver Lewis Hamilton, who subsequently won the race after defending his advantage with 10-lap older hard compound tires. We'll talk about that in a minute. Valtteri Bottas finished third after making a late final stop for medium compound tires to claim that extra championship point for the fastest lap. Sergio Perez also stopped 3 times on his Red Bull debut, finishing 5th after having started from the pit lane. AlphaTauri's Pierre Gasly was only on a 3-stopper. He DNF'd, though, following a pit stop due to contact early in the race. The temperatures, they were cooler on race day than they had been previously during the weekend, and I think this may have played into Mercedes' hands a little bit. With 21 degrees ambient track temperatures, that's in centigrade, and 25 degrees track temperatures, as well as gusting winds, which I think both Mercedes and Red Bull, certainly Max mentioned it several times, how difficult those winds were. There were a number of different strategies, folks, seen throughout the race, which was shortened by 1 lap after the extra formation lap they did. In total, folks, we saw 5 different strategies in the top 6. So those are some of the key talking points out of this Grand Prix. Paul, we're going to start off with the winner, Mercedes, Lewis Hamilton in P1, Valtteri Bottas in P3. Hamilton got in front of Max, pitting earlier, but Verstappen was able to benefit from tires that were 11 laps younger during that final stint. Both drivers ran different 2-stop strategies, and it was Lewis who was able to manage his tires that were 10 laps older than Max's to hold on to first place and take the victory. The aggressive strategy caught Red Bull out, and they were playing catch-up for the rest of the race, trying to overcome that early stop of Lewis. They did that aggressive strategy to prevent the undercut. In order to make their strategy work, they had to bank on Lewis's ability to manage his tires, and it has become such a hallmark of his driving skill. He just executed that perfectly. He had 10 lap older, harder compounds and drove it perfectly. Lewis got passed on lap 53, but the previously allowed turn 4 runoff area had become verboten mid race, and because of that, the team were told to cede that position back to Lewis, which they promptly did, arguably perhaps too soon. Some argue that Max had already made the pass on Lewis when he went wide and didn't gain an advantage in passing Lewis. And basically, he was doing the same thing that Lewis had been doing for much of the first half of the race by running wide there. Others said by taking that runoff, it allowed him to go deeper into the turn and make that pass on Lewis. Either way, arguable. How did you see that, Paul?
Turn 4. Or the rest of Lewis's race. There's a
Sublime.
lot of questions there, right? Yeah, I think obviously I think Red Bull had the pace advantage, and I think what Mercedes did, Mercedes as a team and Mercedes and Lewis Hamilton as a driver, was got every little essence out of that race as they could, by their calls on strategy and by Lewis managing the tires. I mean, just a sublime job of. I can't tell you how difficult that probably was for him. I know we speak about Lewis at the end, and every race is his toughest race, most emotional race. But to manage your tires like that, it's going to look fairly unspectacular, right? Because you're basically trying to be as minimalist with your tire as possible, to evolve the tire so it lasts longer. Without giving away too much lap time in the time being. So basically trying to free the tire up, use as little as you can, still remain lap time. So that was incredible that he got to that point anyway, and how long he lasted before Max caught him. But then when Max caught him, he made that move, and that move didn't come off. And we can talk about that in a sec. But when the move, he had to give up the move, and then Lewis had to still stay ahead of Max for the next 3 laps. That was quite a job. He made one error in that whole drive, when he went off.
He had to lock up a little bit.
Yeah, a little lock and went off, which I would have thought would have cost him a lot more than he actually did. But as I said, just maximizing the tire, minimizing the input on the steering wheel was what Lewis Hamilton did, and that's an incredibly difficult thing to do when you're trying to win a race.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, and the strategy, as you mentioned, it was just expertly called. I mean, it was just, that's what makes a Mercedes. Right?
Yeah. And maybe Lewis, obviously he's always been fast. And, he's added little tools to his chest as he's gone along, and he's leveled his mental abilities out as he's gone along. People like, he teammated with Button for a couple of years, and I think Button was really good at that kind of thing. So I think he, as he's gone along, it's not just Lewis the master. I think Lewis extracts certain information from other drivers that he's driven with and drives against, and puts that and figures out how they do it and uses them when and if he needs them, right?
Yeah.
But I think part of that was that turn 4 situation. I mean, obviously it's a big thing, right? Where is the track limits? How are they penalizing the track limits? I think Mercedes went into the race automatically planning on using that turn 4 limit. And they're not just doing it. I'll just keep using it. This is something they come up with a meeting beforehand. Let's do it. Let's see what the sanctioning body supposedly says it's a free reign area, but don't use it to gain an advantage, which has always been my stickler. I hate that sentence, because no matter what you do, if you're using more road than anybody, then you're gaining an advantage. An advantage isn't simply a pass. Advantage is an advantage in tire wear, it's an advantage in lap time, and they were gaining both of those every single lap. That benefited Lewis's track position, for his fight against Max in the end. And I definitely think it was something that the whole team got together and spoke about before the race started. And it was a strategy, as well as their pitting strategy and tire strategy, etc.
Yeah, it's one thing, Paul, to say, well, gosh, that was unfair. That Mercedes was using that, and Lewis in particular was using that runoff. The FIA responded, and they said that they had people watching every single lap, that turn, every single car. Nobody was using except for one car, and they didn't name Lewis, but that one car was using it. To that point, it's one thing if Red Bull were complaining about it and Red Bull fans and Max fans were complaining about it, but even Toto Wolff said that the track limit thing can't read like a Shakespeare novel. It needs to be, and even Lewis said the whole track limit on turn 4 thing was very confusing. So Mercedes and Red Bull, equally confused by the whole situation in turn 4, was saying, no, you can't use it. Well, okay, you can. Well, okay, during the race you can use it as long as you don't get an advantage. And we'll be watching that. Then Lewis running the first half of the race, running wide, which I would too. And Red Bull radios Max and says, oh, Lewis is using that runoff. You do it too. So Max started doing it. Then the FI says, okay, no, wait a minute. No, you guys can't use it. Christian Horner's point was that in their data, they believe that Lewis using that runoff every single lap was gaining like 0.2. And if you compound 0.2 every single lap for first half of the race, that's quite an advantage.
It is, and it's, as I said, I don't blame Mercedes.
Oh, I don't either. I don't either.
I mean, you work within the rules that are given you.
Absolutely.
And the rules, we're not saying if you go over it 3 times, you get a penalty. It didn't really say anything. You say stop it, else we'll say stop it again. We know that doesn't work. Right? It's got to be defined rule. I mean, from my point of view, it's like if, I'd rather the deterrent be off of the track, that you don't want to go off there. We're not talking about brick walls, we're talking about surface irregularities, etc. Make that a rough area, make it somewhere that if you really go off in that area, you have to go off there for safety. It's not still, it's a place where you don't want the car to be. You're gonna have to back off the throttle, or you might damage the car, etc. But it does give you that safety margin, so the driver doesn't get hurt. But it definitely shouldn't be such a big expanse of asphalt that the driver just nothing really happens. You just come back on the track, right? Or it's a defined penalty, and I would much rather it be just a surface that's a deterrent to want to run on at all.
Yeah,
but obviously,
but in some sense,
let them run, or just let them go, and don't define it. If you're not going to define it, then don't define it, and let everyone run there, and everyone choose where they want to run.
Right, but you're a professional driver, Paul. If we're in a car, and you have a corner, a right-hander that you're going into, if you have to stay within the white lines versus if you can run out a little wide. Then as a professional driver, Paul, correct me where I'm wrong on this, but you're going to be able to get the steering wheel straighter quicker. Mm-hmm. You're going to have less steering lock. You're going to be able to get on the throttle earlier, and it's going to impact your braking, meaning that you would be faster through that corner, Paul, as a professional driver, if you could run wide in that corner than you could if you had to stay inside the line, correct?
Absolutely. There's always an equation between steering angle and speed. The less steering input you got, the more speed you can take, right? So that's the steering part of it. And as you say, if you're going to be steering less into the corner, that means you have to slow down less to actually make that initial input on the steering wheel. So you're gaining in the braking area, you're gaining in your minimum speed in the corner, which is the lowest point of mile per hour in the middle of the corner and out. You're able to unwind the wheel earlier, so that means you can get on the throttle earlier. It's all a benefit. But if you're not going to define that as a rule and just get annoyed because people are doing it too much, that it's really the FIA's fault. This whole mess is their fault. They're holding to the rules. But yeah, I mean, as I said, put a deterrent out there. Here's an example. Daytona, the bus stop. Right? Yep. It's quicker. There's 4 turns to the bus stop, right? The last turn is the one that leads you out onto the oval portion, which is a very, very, very long straightaway. If you stay within the lines and stay in the inside of the curb, you come out of that corner maybe 5 miles an hour slower than if you basically just drive across that last curb and go straight. Mm-hmm. Problem is, if you do that too many times, you damage your car. And as the race goes on, more people run out there, and it mourns a differ, and basically the damage gets worse and worse and worse. So you leave it in your pocket to use it when you need it near the end of the race, but it's somewhere you don't want to be consistently for 24 hours, right?
Right.
But it is an advantage. So right here, we're dealing with a shorter race. There's not that big a disadvantage. These cars are built very well. So they can run out there and take a little abuse. The downforce keeps the car down, even with some slight irregularities on the off-road. I mean, I've driven on some tracks where you're basically driving, it feels like you're just ripping the car to pieces, but it's an advantage.
Yeah.
And from what they tell you, it'll be fine. The car can handle it. So you do it, right? But it's not very pleasant to run on. So yeah, all of these things. I mean, the biggest thing for me is cutting corners is the massive advantage, but running out, obviously that definitely has an advantage too. And it's really just defining the rules and keeping them within them. And I hate track limit penalties, but and I think Red Bull making that call really twisted up the FIA to have to do something about it.
Yeah, I think so.
Otherwise, they probably weren't going to say anything.
Right. No, I totally think so. And it's been interesting because this has been certainly a big talking point out of the Grand Prix weekend. And a lot of that decides on which camp you're in. If you're a Mercedes or a Lewis Hamilton fan, certainly you feel like it was not that egregious. If you are a Red Bull Max fan, you feel like the whole turn 4 issue changing sort of mid-race seemingly is bunk. It was interesting because I was reading, so it's fun that there's all the new viewers to Formula One, and I was reading all these youngsters, and they're all on social media, and even young broadcasters, and everybody's having this big debate, and inevitably, whenever something happens like this, like a big controversy around this, inevitably people argue the merits back and forth for only so long. And then eventually somebody brings out the big trump card of what we call the trinity of blunt pummeling devices in the argument of racing, which in this case is always, and we've said this for 10 years on this podcast, it's always one of three things. Eventually, if you can't argue out either way, then eventually somebody's going to drop either cost, sustainability, or in this case, safety. So then everybody starts arguing, it's safety, and you can't be running out there. It's not safe because the track furniture is out there, and it's inevitable, and it's just rehashing these same debates over and over and over. We've said this. I get tired of reading all this stuff because the same argument has been going over and over for a decade. And we said this 10 years ago on this podcast. The FIA either make track limits allowed or don't, all right? Or don't change a mid-race. I mean, that's incredibly junior league at best. And if you can't call consistent rulings by inviting guests to perform as stewards, then you need to fix the damn issue by having a standardized stewarding crew that goes to every race, that knows all the rules and applies them the same consistently on every frickin' race. Because if you don't do that, you leave all of these gray areas for controversy and everybody's all upset. The point of this is that if Lewis is running wide for the first half of the race, and then Max starts running wide to match him, and then the FIA radios and tells him don't run wide in the middle of the race, well, that dog don't hunt.
No, it doesn't. And the thing gets me is, think about the rules of Formula One. Everything is defined, this little box, these millimeters, this 0.00 of millimeter. That's what all the teams are held to, but the FIA apparently aren't.
Yeah.
If the FIA building a race car, they'd have sliding skirts and ABS and traction control and a big high air box like a teapot, and just say, well, I don't know.
Yeah.
Okay, I think. But,
as long as we're not gaining an advantage.
Yeah, but they're in charge of the biggest racing series in the world, and they need to be a little bit more
you gotta get on top
buttoned up, right?
Yeah. I mean, Martin Brundle said, he's a fan of track limits because in his mind, look, the driver shouldn't be driving out there, and the white lines are there for a reason, and you should stay it. Fair enough. Then that's the rule, But if you're going to let them during the weekend run wide on turn 4, but come race you don't, Well, that doesn't work either. Just make a decision and stick to it and be consistent with the decision so we don't have these gray areas. I mean, there's a lot of people that feel like this is arguable from Red Bull's standpoint. No, I haven't read anything that they've done anything. But if I'm Red Bull, yeah, my nose been out of shape a little bit over this.
Yep. But I don't blame Mercedes at all for it.
I don't blame Mercedes and Lewis at all. If I'm Mercedes, I'd have made the same call. If I'm Lewis, I would have done the same thing. So I'm not blaming them at all. Don't take it the wrong way. Valtteri Bottas had a slow second stop, Paul. That pretty much surgically removed him from the race, or at least fighting at the sharp end of the grid. And he wasn't in the fight at that point. But he did manage to stop, throw on some fresh rubber, get a fastest lap. If this is Valtteri's big year, he started with a whimper.
I think he needs to head back to the Swedish sauna.
The sauna, yeah.
Get himself pumped up again or something.
Yeah.
Run around naked in the snow to make him hard.
A little ice swimming, you know.
But Valtteri 3.0 certainly looks a lot like Valtteri 1.0, quite honestly.
Yeah. It's I don't know. He's in the same car in the same team, and Max Verstappen is challenging Lewis, not Valtteri, and that tells you a lot right there. Valtteri should be thereabouts. All right, let's talk about Red Bull. Max Verstappen P2, Sergio Perez in P3. If there is a case,
not P3, P5.
I'm sorry, P5. Good grief. What am I doing over here, Paul? I gotta change my notes. My gosh. What the hell?
Are you crazy?
All right. If there's a case to be made that the long run pace between Red Bull and Mercedes is very close either way, then Max leading from the start but losing the race could be an argument for it. Regardless, the team chose not to box Max with Lewis as they knew he would most likely lose the position. It was a brilliant call by Mercedes, we mentioned. So they basically said, all right, we're going to go the long game. We're looking at the long game here. And that inevitably put him in second with new hard compounds chasing Lewis down at the end. Max did pass Lewis, but ran wide at turn 4, ceded that position back immediately, then lost momentum and grip, wearing off the tires due to running in dirty air, and a bit of a lurid understeer moment that he had trying to get back to Lewis after he had ceded the position. Some argue that he may have let Lewis back too early, and that had he waited until the front straight, that would have given him DRS to attack. Either way, Max came home in second, and the pace should bolster the team despite being bested on strategy. And this means that they're going to have to think harder when it comes to race strategy, as the paces of both teams are very, very close in that situation. I guess let's start up front, Paul. I wanted to ask you, when they chose to box Lewis early, Red Bull had a quick decision to make. So this is the tactics of war. So Mercedes brilliantly pitting early to prevent the undercut. So Red Bull had a choice. They knew if they'd have boxed Max immediately the following lap, he would lose the position, and he would have been behind Lewis. There's probably no doubt about that.
Yeah.
So they chose to run long and then try to finish with fresher tires than Lewis and have a go then.
Right.
I could see the logic. I can see the thinking in both. However, there's a part of me that thinks they should have boxed him. This is woulda, shoulda, coulda. But had they boxed him the lap right after, yes, he would have lost the lap, but he would have had more laps to get back around to Lewis and get back in command of the race. Is that how you see it, or am I off on that?
Yeah, I mean, I think that probably, that extra 5 laps was just not either go an extra 10 laps or pitch right away, right? Obviously they'd done their calculations, because both times he went 5 laps longer, which ended up being 10 laps longer on that final stint, and it should have worked. Quite honestly, that should have worked.
Yeah.
But if they had more speed than Lewis, I think that was so running the same strategy as Lewis, toe for toe, they should have been able to beat him. I think if they'd pitted him instantly, he may have come out behind Lewis, but he'd come out right behind Lewis. And this world of DRS would have made it when fresh tires, 3 laps, on those fresh tires, I think could have made easy work for him to get around Lewis at that point. Because you kind of see where the fall off on the tire is, that. So I just think, yeah, I think inherently they had the knife, they had the gun to the fight, right? So I didn't think they had to react and try and strategize their way around Lewis. But that being said, the strategy they ran still should have worked. When Verstappen caught Lewis, it's great to see Verstappen try in those places. We've seen him, pass in non-DRS areas and but I don't think in this place it was the right call to try and make those lunging efforts into those corners. I think he had the life of the tire. He could have just kind of stuck behind Lewis for a few more corners and made the standard DRS pass down the main straight and be done with it. Once he did catch him, right? But there's also a theory to, as soon as you get there, you make the move. And I still think that still plays out, even if he'd waited a couple more corners to do that, because he's saved his tires. Lewis is playing the tire saving mode. Verstappen is doing that, but gearing up. So he's going to get the maximum out of his tire to make that one move that he thinks he should be able to execute and be ahead. And then it's fair sailing after that. So because that move didn't pull off, he basically took the edge off the tire. And then at that point, he was kind of stuck behind in the dirty air, and he just didn't have enough left in the car, obviously, to give it another go. It came close on that, but he just ran out of time. As to when he should have passed him, yes, as you say, hindsight, right? He had the call on the radio, so he let Lewis go immediately. Ultimately, I think what he should have done is let him pass after that next series of turns. The long left-hander, long right-hander, both really aero-dependent turns where even if you've had the DRS run up, you still have to give a fair amount of gap to actually keep that aero grip in your car. So he let Lewis off right in that previous DRS zone. They had to go through those two long sustained aero generating corners. So then he couldn't really get close enough to really give a stab instantly. So ultimately, I think after that left and right is when he should have let Lewis by. So then he would have had the DRS going into that last corner, down the main straight, through the turns 1, 2, 3 area. And then once again, I think he probably would have done it then at that point. But yeah, where he let him by, I think was probably not beneficial. And where he actually tried to make the pass in the first place was probably not the smartest thing to do, but that's kind of the max thing to do, right?
Yeah, right. And of course, it's the beauty of hindsight. Hindsight's 2020. But I think, if you were going to parse it back and parse out the strategy, there's something to be said about waiting, either waiting for that DRS just to haul you in, where you seated that position, doing it to give you the DRS down the front straight. Those options were all there. But to your point, in fairness, Paul, is it took Max longer than I expected to eventually close up on Lewis.
Right.
And there was traffic in between them and that kind of thing. And it took longer.
Traffic wasn't his friend.
No, it wasn't. And it looked like it took longer than perhaps Red Bull was thinking it would take for him to catch back up to Lewis. So once he got there, then trundling around in dirty air wasn't going to do his tires any favor. And as he said, they just choose the tires up if you're in dirty air. So once he got there, he was going for the pass, and to your point, if you get there, you go for it because you don't have a lot of time to run around behind Lewis and chew up your tires. So
I lost a race once that way. That's why it kind of
Did
sticks
you?
in my craw. Yeah. I was running this guy down to win the race. It was at Lime Rock, and the pit on the radio, I was just about to make a move into turn 1, and he said, no, wait, get him in the next point. And then I had it all figured out in my head. I was going to do it, right? And then we came around the next corner, and then I got traffic, right? And then the guy got 3 seconds ahead, and I had to chase him down, the whole next 2 laps. And I was, side by side with him across the start finish line. But if I'd have just made that move, which I was really planning to do right away, it would have kicked him out of the way, and it would have been an easy win. So those kind of things. That's why I don't blame anyone for making that. As soon as you get there, make the move, right?
Yeah.
Certainly can't blame him for that. But ultimately, I think Mercedes and Hamilton beat them with smarts, whereas the Red Bull was actually the faster car.
Yeah, it's kind of the impression I got too. And it was, I think I took, I gave them both a win on my race report because I think both teams did a remarkable job. It's just that Mercedes, they're wily old seasoned veterans, man, and they did a good job on that. Let's talk about Sergio because Sergio stopped on the formation lap and then had to start from the pit lane with electronics error or issue. But despite that, Paul, if you were wondering if hiring a veteran like Sergio was a good idea, you just got a big dose of what for, as this is exactly why they hired him. He drove all the way back into fifth place for critical team points. If you aren't going to beat Max, then you need to finish right behind him. And there is little doubt in my mind that once settled in, Sergio will be an awesome addition to this team. And in my mind, I think he may have been able to claim third place with that bad pit stop by Bottas had he not suffered that electrical problem. I think he would have been a podium for sure. And I think Sergio looked fantastic. But that's so Sergio of him, to be at the back, drive all the way back up into the points, manage his tires. It was a great performance, and it's overshadowed because he was down in P5. But I would argue the other teammates the last couple of years would have been nowhere.
Right. I mean, you never know. They both had shining moments too at some point, but
yeah, they did
for sure. The Red Bull aren't leaving going, oh man, this old man.
Yeah.
He did an incredible job, heads up thinking, getting the car started again, because evidently when the electrics went, everything went. He couldn't even talk to the crew, so he figured it out on his own, which is experience, right?
Yeah.
But then bringing it from where he did all the way to fifth place, a sensational drive.
Yeah.
And he hasn't been, Max takes a lot of the headlines, and Sergio, hasn't been blitzing Max by any means, but it's his first race in a car that Max has been in for 4 years or so, right? And he's the one that's they all herald as the man that's going to win them the championship. So I think Sergio definitely did himself lots of favor in that drive. Unfortunately, he started on the back heels. So I think, who needs to be very scared is Valtteri Bottas right now. Because I think, the Red Bulls are going to have two cars to fight that team now.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, the Red Bulls are, as I think we talked about this in the preview too.
Yeah, in the preseason, we did.
Yeah, we talked about it. Yeah. And I said, those two Red Bulls are going to beat the crap out of Valtteri.
Yeah.
So if he has any designs of beating Lewis, you'd better get on it, because they're going to beat the crap out of that second Mercedes. And I think Sergio is the guy to do it. And Sergio, in my mind, didn't leave anything on the table in this race weekend. He drove all the way back to the points critical, made some great passes in doing so. And just a fabulous race, given that this is the first race he's been in that car.
Awesome.
Fantastic. There's another guy.
We like your pace, Sergio.
Yeah, right. I've got that here.
You like my pace? You like it?
Yes, I do, Sergio. There's another bloke down the grid whose first race didn't quite turn out this well, and we'll get to him in a minute. But zing! I know.
Crazy.
Woo! So anyway, great race from Sergio. Let's talk about McLaren. Lando Norris, P4, Daniel Ricciardo in P7. Lando may not have had the best qualifying, if we're honest, on Saturday, but he redeemed himself by beating Daniel off the line and ran a terrific race to fourth place. Lando entered this season, in my mind, Paul, watching him talk and everything before, he just looked like a little more mature young man heading into this. He was more serious-faced young man, and he knows that the arrival of Dan means he has to up his game by a large margin, and he did that on Sunday, Paul. He did it really well. And he's got to, if this is going to be his team, he's dealing with a wicked weapon in Daniel Ricciardo, and he just looked more focused, more serious, more dedicated and committed. And Sunday, I think he delivered in spades.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, there's no doubt that Ricciardo is a known quantity, right? And I think people, think he's an incredible driver all the way up and down the grid, and just luck of the draw, the jigsaw pieces, musical chairs. He hasn't ended up at a Mercedes or a Red Bull. Well, he was at the Red Bull, of course, but so he's a known quantity. Sainz was still a bit not so much. So not a big threat to Norris, if so to speak. But definitely, if Norris wants to stake his claim on a Formula One career, he needs to do something equal, if not better, than Ricciardo. And he went and did it. He's been a bit quiet in the off season. Ricciardo's been heralded, been a little higher up the charts, speed charts, etc. So it seemed like Norris was a bit in the shadows a little bit, but he cured all that with this drive.
Yeah, it was great. For Dan, look, a first race for McLaren. Dan felt it was a good start. While he lost out to Lando, Leclerc, and took a belting from Gasly from behind, he did manage to bring it home in the points. It's not bad for a brand new car to him. Did he leave some on the table? Maybe, but did he, he did. I guess maybe you could say he did, but it's his first race in a McLaren with a new engine, new drivability, new brakes, new systems. So in my mind, I think you can have some patience for him as he gets his sea legs over there.
Yeah, I think Daniel, as we've seen when he jumped from Red Bull to Renault, is that he demands certain things from a car. The team need to figure out how to give to him. If you remember when he's got, he had problems with the brakes, etc. And we know that that's one of the really positive things that Daniel brings is the king of the late breakers and executing a car into the turn, but I think he really needs the car to work with his skill set. And so I don't think McLaren quite have that figured out yet. So I think it was a really good drive. I think he's definitely got the speed. He hasn't, certainly not losing anything at this point. No. He's got years of performing at a very, very high level. So I think it's just a matter of matching the Daniel Ricciardo style to the McLaren car, quite honestly. And we're going to see quite a battle between these two.
Yeah, I think in the the braking and throttle traces that they would show between Lando and Daniel were interesting, where Lando was braking later than Dan.
Right, right. Which who brakes later than Daniel
Nobody.
Ricciardo?
Nobody. Yeah. Right. So that was interesting. All right, let's talk about Ferrari. Charles Leclerc, P6, Carlos Sainz, P8. Considering where they came from in 2020, Ferrari had a good result up in P6 for Leclerc. Charles had some good battles on track to hold on to 6. He initially was challenging Bottas, but to be fair, at the beginning, he was on the soft compounds. Valtteri wasn't. So I think, tire corrected, thereabouts. But his pace remained very strong, even when he did get on similar rubber to those around him. He did manage to beat his teammate too. Carlos was looking good over the weekend, and Charles put that to bed and did a pretty good job. For Carlos, well, let me let you comment on Charles first, if you have some comments on that, and then we'll get to Carlos.
Well, first of all, Ferrari, it seems like whatever they did in the preseason test, it kind of just directly transposed to this race, which doesn't always happen, right?
Yeah, right.
So I think it's a really good step for Ferrari in general to be where they are, maybe a bit higher than certainly I expected them to be. I don't know about you, but right now, and Charles, very racy, I think, he didn't really quite have that weapon to fight with, but I think, in his hands, he's still got that tiger instinct and still driving like the Charles Leclerc we saw win races not so long ago. So I think it was really good to see him really fight as hard as he did and keep it up there in that sharp end. Really, really nice job by Charles and the team quite in general. I think, I saw some big statements. Ferrari have solved all their issues. I don't think they've solved all their issues, but I think they've solved some of their issues that makes them a bit more competitive for 2021, certainly versus last year.
Yeah, certainly the question marks in Ferrari, did they have more shove and did they have less drag? And I think the answer is yes to both. On that. For Carlos, he said, look, I didn't want to take too many risks at the start, and he lost a couple places because of it, but as he's still getting used to the car and the systems, he wanted to see how the car would react in dirty air before really giving it the beans. The question is, do they have enough to battle for third in the championship and take some of the steam out of McLaren? How much development will they pour into this car in order to do so? Ferrari, to me also, kind of like you said, they had sort of a quiet, calm testing, translated that right into the race. To me, this is a little different Ferrari. It seems pretty calm during testing and pretty calm during the first race. There's not a lot of controversy, not a lot of arm waving. that just seems pretty calm, pretty cool approach to the season with a better engine, lower drag, and producing better results than last year.
Yeah. I think science once again, just like Ricardo, trying to figure his way out. There's, you think you're going to come in to a team and have Charles Leclerc as your teammate and just be right on that pace. Very, very hard. Even if you're a better driver than him, which who knows. Who I think is definitely a good driver, Carlos. But it'd be, even if you're a better driver, you just don't come in and make that kind of move on a guy of the standard that Charles is. But yeah, I mean, obviously the engine development is super important because 2022, the cars are all going to be different. So for them to put all their assets into the engine, very, very important because they're kind of going to be frozen, right? So that's a good positive move. I think certainly the positive move in the aerodynamics is a good sign for the future as well, because it means they're starting to get their systems. They're learning by the big mistakes they made,
right.
And starting to develop a good system to improve a car and design a new car that is an improvement on the last one and get a little closer to the front end again.
Yeah. The next team to talk about, AlphaTauri, Pierre Gasly, DNF, Yuki Tsunoda in P9. And you're thinking, I don't know about that. What's actually happened there? This car certainly entered the first race with lots of hype around it for all the right reasons. They do look very fast, Paul, this team. And this car, lots of rake on the back of that AlphaTauri. They look really fast. Pierre qualified P5, Paul. I mean, that's for real, legit merit. Pierre had a great qualifying session, started the race strong, but then, unfortunately, hit the back of Ricciardo's McLaren at the safety car restart, ripped off his front wing, prompted a long start. He dropped to last. Then he ends up retiring on the season opener, which is not what he wanted to do. I'm sure he'll bounce back, but it's just not quite what you're expecting from Pierre in that first race in the weapon that he has in his hands.
Yeah, I think he maybe got a little carried away. I mean, it was such a minute touch, and it's like, geez, it's like that thing had incendiary devices to blow it off. It's like big ball, wow, it's all gone. So first lap, first race of the year, maybe give yourself a bit more of a margin. But I think he's proven himself, so I don't think he really needs to work his way into things. And I think I can't say it was a big error by him. It was just, in the car, that part of the track, the cars are moving around quite a lot from left side to the right side. So it was an easy mistake to make. We can, hindsight again, very easy to say, well, he should have given a bit more room, but I don't think it was a massive error. I was just surprised that he couldn't come back from it a bit better than he did. We saw Sergio come from the pit lane to fifth. I still expected actually Gasly, even with the nose change, to actually get in the points, but he seemed out to lunch the whole time. So
I'm assuming maybe there was further damage to that car than what we may have known, because I was expecting him to march back up at least into the points. But he didn't get there. But his teammate did. Yuki Tsunoda was left holding the bag for Franz Tost, and he did so with great passing and a run to the points in his very first F1 race. It's been a long time since a Japanese driver has scored F1 points, and Yuki did it on his first attempt. And this also shows that the car has some serious pace in that car, which is good for them. Can this team upset the sharp end of the midfield? Time will tell, but with Gasly qualifying in P5, chances are they may have a very good season ahead of them.
Yeah. As we talked about before, I think the car's good. It's a top 5 manufacturer car. I'm just not sure that the teammate issue might lose them some points. I think Tsunoda had a good run. Have you listened to him on the mic in the car? He's interesting. I'm not sure if I'm going to like him a lot or really dislike him. I'm not sure yet, because some of the things and rants he's made when he came out, was it in qualifying or started yelling at the team over the mic. I'm like, I'm not sure that's why I'd start doing my first race. I mean, it shows he's got a lot of drive, and he is a young guy, right? And maybe the team will afford him some of that. I'm not sure what to make of him. I think he's a good driver. I think he's a real racer. He's, I don't want to say a typical Japanese driver, but, he goes for a gap,
Yeah, he does.
I think they live by the center motive, honestly.
They
if there's a gap,
do.
Yeah, you don't go for it, you know.
Yeah.
You
And
have
if
to
you
win a
no
race.
longer go for a gap that exists, you're no longer a racing driver.
There you go.
Yeah, I think every Japanese driver
I think
hears
so.
that before they get into a car.
Yeah.
So I think he's a good racer. I think he's fast. I think the car's good. There's going to be some ups and downs, and as I said, he just needs to manage his interaction with the team to have them on his side rather than bristling just a little bit.
Yeah, that first one was kind of a, he gets on the radio and he's like,
Cheap, lying, no good, rotten, four-flushing.
he's like, whoa, Yuki, calm down, man. You can do that a couple times with Franz Toast, but you keep doing that, you're going to pull back a bloody stump. So
Yeah,
be careful. That Franz Toast is vicious now.
He can be. He's very calm, and then he'll lash out.
Yeah, he just lash out, man. Okay. Let's
Okay.
get to Aston Martin, shall we? Aston
Can I leave
Martin.
the room here? I'm a little uncomfortable.
I know. So Aston Martin, Lance Stroll, P10.
I want it now! What's the matter with those twats down there?
And Sebastian Vettel in P15. Oh my, Stroll, look, in all fairness, Lance had actually a good race.
Yep.
And, while the pace isn't clearly there yet, as reminded by Otmar, every time he had a hot mic, he was reminding us all that the regulations they're geared to the low rate cars, So he was, that was difficult. But he reminded us that. But Lance did manage a top 10 result. Actually looked rather racy at times. I mean, he was up in the points and getting pretty racy. It was also it was also the first time this weekend I hadn't noticed, but it was the first time. Seb has the yellow T-bar at the top of the airbox, and not Lance.
Okay.
Meaning that Lance is the number one, the prime car, and Vettel's in the yellow. Yeah. The seasoned 4-time champ.
He's
in
the
yellow.
trainer.
Yeah, right. So I thought that was interesting. So there you go.
Yeah, no, I thought it was actually a good race by the
It
Greek.
was.
He was up in sixth place at some
Yeah,
point.
that's what I'm
And I
saying.
think the pace of the car just wasn't there, and he gradually slipped back.
Yeah.
But I think ultimately, for them getting a point in that race, I think was actually a really positive move till they try and figure out their downforce settings and their rake settings and trying to figure a way out of the hole that the FIA have come down on them. But you're right, yeah. And so there's a lot to be uncomfortable about listening to Aston Martin this weekend, and Otmar was definitely one of them too. So don't give that guy a mic again. So, and then we have, of course, Vettel.
Yes, I don't know what where the pace has gone. I don't know where the car has gone with Seb.
Yeah.
Maybe he should have named this car instead of after a Bond girl. Maybe he should have named this car
Where is Jessica Hyde?
because there's nowhere. I don't know where that was. He had that 5-place grid penalty for ignoring yellows in qualifying. That meant Seb started from the back of the grid, and he had a ragged run up to the field trying to make his two-stopper work. Much was made of McLaren's pace and terrific testing program, but I'm not convinced that ultimately, did I say McLaren? I meant Aston Martin. Much was made about their testing pace and the lack of pace or how they would do. I'm not quite sure I'm still not quite sure where that car is over a season. I think Lance was more representative of where the car is currently. And, like you said, here's the thing you mentioned, it'd be very difficult coming in to a team like that and a new car, and besting a guy like Charles Leclerc. You're talking about Carlos Sainz, right? But here's a case where you have a 4-time champion coming into that car, new car to him, admittedly, but you're going up against Lance. And, he just looked off this weekend. He hit Ocon. Then he said Esteban changed direction on him, which if you watch the video, he didn't. And there's many who are wondering if there's more going on with Seb than just a low rake.
Yes, let's just say I don't think the mental issues he was struggling with at Ferrari have disappeared when he moved to Aston Martin. I think he's still struggling there. It has to do with that qualifying lap. I'm sure he saw the yellow, but his thought in his head is, I really need to get a good lap, and
Yeah.
hopefully no one saw me or whatever. I mean, he was basically done already by the double yellow. So, but he pushed through and got the penalty, which made it even worse, right?
Right.
Not very worse, because he was already on the second to last row, so it didn't make it horrible worse because of how badly he'd already qualified. But then you hear him rant and rave on the microphone, as you said, saying that Ocon moved, and it was like, where did that come from?
Yeah.
But we've heard these kind of verbalisms from him before. Is verbalism a word? I'm not sure it is now. Anyway, but and it's just a weakness. It's a weakness in him, and I think he's really struggling. And I'd hoped, he could wash away the Ferrari years and come back to some kind of Vettel of past. But I just think I think he's just gone over that cliff. He's jumped the shark in his talent, and I think he's just trying to find excuses as to why he's just not that fast anymore.
Yeah, it's just, you're just kind of watching this unraveling.
Pre-practice. It's called pre-practice. Who gives a I'm out! Really, Sebastian is crazy. That's a real bummer. You know what? Here's the message for Charlie. Oh, honestly. Can I go for a wee?
There you go.
You might want to go for a wee and just keep on moving this.
I don't know, man. He's got to turn this around. He really does. I don't think Otmar or anyone at that team wants Sebastian to come over and just kind of trundle around midfield.
No. And I think some of the comments they've made internally, he's brought a lot. He's really brought in a lot of, changes and way to drive the team up, but I'm not sure I actually believe that's what's really going on. It's nice words to hear because that's what they hope to expect from him, but I'm not sure that that's what he's delivering.
Yeah, I don't know. It's going to be a difficult season for the team and Sebastian if he doesn't sort of get out of that mold and recapture that pace and recapture that desire to do and to drive and wring as much as he possibly can out of that car. Having said that, there was some kind of fun passing watching him. When Alonso and Sainz passed Seb and then Seb repassed Alonso, I thought that was a great, back and forth there. He looked great at that point. But yeah, I don't know what's going on there. So watch this space. But at this point, Aston's kind of, hope they find that pace.
How much does this guy cost?
Yeah. Lawrence is like, what did I spend?
You crazy?
Yeah.
I just have to take my kid out for a meal every night, pay for his ride.
Right. It's so true.
I can bring that Mazepan guy in with a bunch of money to crash my car.
Right.
Jesus Christ.
All right. Talk about Alfa Romeo. Oh, yeah.
How the that's possible?
Our friend Kimi over there. He's in P11. Antonio Giovinazzi, P12. Kimi had a great start, actually. Looked as if he might get his Alpha up and in the points. There were a couple moments in that race. He was having some good battles. Looked great. Didn't look like the oldest man on the grid out there in my mind. But when, there were a couple of cars out of sequence, when they sort of regained position, such as Perez, et cetera, they started to recover. And as their strategy unfolded, he kind of fell out of the points. And then he was a little longer stint on those final mediums, so they didn't hold up as well as I'm sure he wanted him to. And then he dropped back out of the points. But I think all in all, for the Alfa and for Kimi in particular, I thought it wasn't a bad race. And I thought he was there in the hunt for points, and that was a positive.
Yeah, no, I think both of them actually. Giovinazzi had some good stints and runs over the weekend.
Both of them battling with each other quite a bit.
Yeah, I think they were both. I think was maybe a bit better than I expected the Alfa Romeo to be. Maybe that bodes because the Ferrari engine may be a bit stronger than it had been, but I think it was a decent run for him. As you say, it looked like they could have been in the points, but I think just the strategies and life of the tire maybe gave them a full sense of where they are. But I think it was a possibility if everything had gone perfect for them to score points. They just stayed outside of there. But I think, if this is a good baseline for Alfa, then maybe things look a little brighter for them than I was expecting. So that's great for Kimi. You know?
Yeah, and Gio said they're definitely faster than they were last year, and that's positive. A lot of this, Paul, again, depends on in-season development. They could be squarely in the midfield hunting for points at each race. And in fact, if they do have some cash to throw at this, they could find themselves kind of battling with Aston Martins if Aston Martin doesn't find a recovery to speed.
And the development thing is an interesting one when you're comparing team to team to team and depending their alliances.
Yeah, right.
Because sometimes, a team like Alfa Romeo rely heavily on what Ferrari have developed for their car and getting those pieces, right? So maybe it allows them to maybe steal a couple of positions in the championship by being a bit more aggressive with development of what they can be developing. And, when other teams are maybe backing off and trying to save their, save their resources for the next year. So it can be an opportunity to finish a bit higher in the championship if the team deem that a positive way to go.
Well, and they do need to be judicious with their resources for sure because of the 2022 regulation changes. But I think a key thing for me anyway is that Alfa Romeo's contract is up with this team at the end of this year. So they have a couple things to worry about. Will Alfa Romeo sign up for another stint with this team and back this team at the end of this year? Would they do that if you're being ridiculous with your resources? Maybe not. So maybe the full-on development war isn't an option for them. On the flip side, Paul, if you could be a little more exotic with your development and keep that team fighting for points, then those points start to add up in millions for them. And maybe that appeases Alfa Romeo to sign up. So they've got to have those internal dialogues. I'm sure they are, if they haven't already with Alfa Romeo, about what the expectations in the final season are. But, a couple things to think about for that team.
Yeah, no, it's a good point. But I think Alfa Romeo is a pawn for Ferrari. And I don't see where Alfa Romeo could go elsewhere. And every Ferrari, Mercedes, Red Bull, they all need that secondary team to help achieve what they need to achieve,
Right.
And so I think they still, Ferrari still need Alfa to be there. Yeah. And I don't see why they would switch alliances from Sauber right now.
Yeah, I hope not, because I love Alfa being in the series.
Yeah.
Let's talk about Alpine. Fernando Alonso, DNF, Esteban Ocon, P12. There's still, for me anyway, there's still a little bit of a dark cloud hanging over Alpine as to what their true pace might be. It's a little difficult to discern. Esteban languished down the field after a troubling qualifying session and had a low grid position, but Alonso comparatively was running in the points for most of the race. And that disparity between the two is hard to read as to if Alpine has the pace to be in the hunt with McLaren, or is this simply the Alonso factor, right? Unfortunately, Alonso retired with overheated rear brakes due to a sandwich wrapper that got into his brake duct. It's kind of Alonso's luck, isn't it? And and Ocon, unfortunately, got mugged by Vettel, and that pretty much paid rest to the rest of their day anyway. Apparently, the sandwich got in the brake air intake, and that's what overheated the system. So I don't know, Paul, as you watch them, you watch their onboards, you look at the way that car's handling. You've got Esteban, poor qualifying, starts in the back, didn't really make his way back up the field, but Alonso was there in the points, and he was hustling. You could see he didn't have the paces of the Red Bulls and maybe the McLarens, but he was thereabouts.
Yeah, I think there is definitely the Alonso factor in there, maybe moving it up a couple of spots. I think the Alpine is a top 10 car. They didn't obviously get to execute it because of that brake issue and because of getting punted by Vettel, but I think it's ahead of the Aston Martin right now. Whether it's ahead of anything else, I'm not so sure in that midfield run down. I think there's potential in the car. I think Alonso is going to push that team hard, as he always does, right? And I think at least they're thinking outside of the box with their design of the car, etc. So I think they do have some potential for growth in pace. I don't think they got enough for McLaren.
Right.
They might be able to fight it with AlphaTauri for that 5th spot, but that's probably not why Alonso came back, mind you.
No more radio the rest of the race.
Yeah, there you go.
Yeah.
All right, let's talk about Williams. George Russell, P14, Nicholas Latifi at DNF. George had a good race and was even sniffing for a single point in 10th, but his last stop dropped him back in the order, and he couldn't really recover from that. But he wasn't miles off of Ocon's pace, to be fair to him. And then Latifi retired due to some sort of boosting system issue, was the last I saw from the team. So not much to talk about Nicholas's race, but George didn't look bad there for the first half of the race, Paul.
Yeah, I think the Williams is kind of where we thought it might be. You know, definitely stepping up from last year and obviously leapfrogging the Haas car and nipping at the heels at the back of the midfield. I think that's kind of where it's at. And you know, we know Russell can hustle a car around, and I think they're going to score points this year. But obviously, this wasn't the one to do it. But I think definitely, you know, they're not being left behind by the midfield anymore, which is great to see.
Yeah, it's a very tight midfield, Paul.
Oh, it's so tight. It's so
talk about compressed.
Oh my God, it's great, and it's going to ebb and flow from race to race, and one car works and etc. So that as I said, they're going to have their chance to be in, you know, the Aston Martin pace and getting in the 9th or 10th position at some point. Certainly in Russell hands, anyway.
Yeah, this is a testament to the stability of the regulations, right?
Yeah, right.
Yeah, and so
now
you're
we're going to blow it all up here.
Yeah, now we're going to blow it up. So you're seeing the compression between Mercedes and Red Bull at the top with McLaren, and then you get the compression in the midfield, and everybody's closer and closer. And it should, hopefully this year, it delivers really good racing. Yep. Now we get down to Gene Haas. Woo! Haas F1. You got Mick Schumacher, P16, Nikita Mazepin at DNF. Yeah, Nikita. Well,
that's strange. I wonder what's causing all the accidents.
Yes.
Yes. If there was a reason for the Mazepin haters to really lay it on thick, then this weekend was it. After a lurid qualifying and then a radio tantrum followed by his first lap crash that damaged the car and a team that can't afford damage. Now, in fairness to Nikita, that car is clearly not that easy to drive because Schumacher himself spun the car, but he kept it out of the wall, continued to come home in a very lonely 16th place.
Yes. Unpleasant, I was called the Haas. I think the whole situation is unpleasant.
The whole thing
the team is unpleasant. The car is unpleasant.
Right.
Tina Mazepin, he's an unpleasant fellow also. So there was not too many crying that saw him take a big digger into the barrier on lap 1 corner whirl. I'll tell you that much.
Yeah, this just in. Nikita Mazepin, unpleasant.
I don't see him winning any Driver of the Day awards either.
No, you're probably right. Yeah. So there's how that ended. I'm just hoping. I know. Can there be
I see this Haas as like the Hertz rental car Formula One team right now. And I don't know where they're going. Are they setting it up to sell the team? Are they just trying to hold on for dear life till next year? I don't know, but it's going to be horrible talking about the team all year long, quite honestly.
I know.
Mick Schumacher in that position, but
I know. I'd much rather see him at Alpha.
Yeah, that's what he's got.
You're just waiting. You're just hoping there might be some magic thing to happen over at Haas. Just magically, something will happen and occur, and harmony will spread, and who knows? All right, Paul, let's get to some awards. We hand out awards after every race, and the first award we do is Move of the Race. Woo! There you go. Move of the race, Paul. What was your move?
My move of the race is actually Norris. I think that big move at the beginning we talked about, he's got Ricciardo coming in there. There's no hiding from Daniel Ricciardo. Right. And he was a bit in the shadows, but his big move was to get by Ricciardo early and put a really spirited drive on and really get some good points. So I would call that a move of the race, certainly for his career. Nice. And with his career, helps McLaren too. I think it just helps that whole team in a friendly, competitive nature push it forward.
Yeah, no, that's good. That's a good move of the race. Let's see. For move of the race, I chose Mercedes pitting Lewis early and putting Red Bull in the back foot and in chase mode for the rest of the race. And they basically put Red Bull. If you're gonna if you want the win, you're gonna have to come and get it, and you're gonna have to come and get it against a guy who knows how to manage tires.
Yeah.
Lewis was sublime. Thought he did a fabulous job. Mercedes did a fabulous job. So yeah, for me, that was the move of the race. To cover that, next award happens to be Donkey of the Race.
We'll do it live.
All right, Paul, Donkey of the Race.
We definitely had a couple of donkeys in the pen, but I've got to give it to Vettel, 4-time champion, still making those excuses. Poor, lame, excuses and just not performing. I mean, it was
That's a real
sad to
bummer.
see it. Because I like the guy.
I do too.
But boy, when he gets behind the wheel and when he starts getting on a microphone and making those mistakes, it's hard to, understand why he's picked for that spot to bring Aston Martin to the front. I'm not sure he's got it anymore.
Yeah, there's a lot to choose here. I'm going to go with Mazepin. Yeah,
he may win this a lot this year.
He might at this rate. Yeah, at this rate, he may. Yeah, it's. I know we're all going to be after every race going. What the hell? You can
actually name it. Automatically change the name to the Marzipan Donkey Award.
Yeah, exactly. It's crazy.
His dad may pay for that if you don't tell him what it's
about. Oh yeah, he may sponsor the podcast. I'm sure. After all the love we've given him here.
Well, then we'd change. If we started sponsoring the podcast, we'd be talking about how great that first corner.
Yeah, we
was,
would.
And it's the track design that is completely wrong.
Exactly, and the FIA with the whole track limits.
Yeah, why did they put a barrier on the left? They didn't put a barrier where Lewis was driving.
Right. Come on, man. All right. The final award is Drive of the Race.
It's in there, Lewis.
Yes. Drive of the Race. Who are you giving it to?
I got to give it to Sergio.
Oh!
You like my bass? You like it?
Yes, that's who I gave it to.
Yeah. I mean, well deserved, right?
Yeah.
Geez, this is why you don't want to experiment with your number 2 driver at Red Bull.
Exactly
he proved every last dollar they spent on him.
Which, Paul, you and I have been arguing for numerous seasons now. Red Bull has to get serious about it. You got to quit monkeying around with rookies. You got to get a veteran in who's going to deliver. Sergio absolutely did, and I believe he will deliver.
Yes. Yep.
So that was my drive of the race. All right, let's talk. Let's see, what are we up to now? Are we doing mailbag?
You've got mail.
Yes, let's do mailbag. All right, so Matt Jones asked, looking forward to the race review. Well, thank you, Matt. We were too. From the weekend debate about high/low rake and the effect on performance, am I right in thinking that this affects the car more during the high downforce elements? So with Bahrain being a relatively low downforce track, apart from Sector 2, where Red Bull was strong, do you think the gap... Yep, exactly. Do you think the gap between Red Bull and Merc will be a lot further at more downforce-dependent tracks? And secondly, I'm sure that the Mighty Merc will be able to counter this, but it makes me worry for Aston Martin that, as Otmar says, the suspension is homologated, so they can't even fix what I assume is a known and easy fix and may have to write off the season early. What do you think?
I mean, the rules are written for everybody at the same time.
Yep, they're the same for everyone.
So they shouldn't be surprised by how the rules work out. Mm-hmm. Yes, they've been kind of two different outlooks on how to set up the aerodynamics. Initially, it seemed like the new rules were going to be less favorable to high rake cars, but it ended up as things rolled out here that's not the way it was. They create that downforce in different ways. Obviously with a high rake, it really relies on that last part of the diffuser really sucking that car down. With the low rake cars, it's more about they've got a more surface area to utilize, and some of the rules on that under tray has taken away some of the ways of the team sealing that platform. And even though they've got a bigger area, a lot of that area is kind of getting out rather than being able to stay in because of the new rules limiting that. And that's kind of where they're falling on their face a little bit. And obviously downforce works at any speed, right? They will look at the tempo, right? So downforce is always important. High downforce, low downforce tracks, whatever.
Aerodynamics come in at any speed.
There you
There
go.
you go. Jackie said it like no other, right?
Yep.
So, but I think if you're talking about Mercedes and Red Bull, I think Mercedes are going to keep striving to maximize and maybe manipulate their car as much as they can to see where those downsides of the low rake, because evidently they're raising their rake to, but in order to, you don't just stick your car up there and now would like the rest of them. It's a complete package, right?
Yeah.
So it's nose to tail aerodynamics work. So you've got to make it work everywhere. So it's going to take a little bit of development for the teams to grab some of that back from and develop a high rake profile if that's what needs to happen, versus because of the rules of simplifying that under tray under there. So it's just something that the Aston Martin team have to get their head around as well, quite honestly. I don't think it's as big a gap now, obviously, as we saw between Mercedes and Red Bull in that, and I think it's going to get a lot closer as the season goes on. So yes, downforce is always the most important thing in Formula One nowadays, right? So no matter if it's and where downforce is more prevalent is on those medium high speed cornering tracks, not straightaways, obviously. So that's where we'll see maybe Red Bull's advantage show up a little bit more.
Yeah, I agree. And I think to your point, it's one thing to have that higher rake, but you remember last year in testing, Red Bull had that high rake and they really were spinning and struggling, and it took them the majority of last year to kind of get on top of that. And then towards the end of the season, you started to see that development start to play in where it was working with that high rake really well. Now they've carried that into this year. Now, if Mercedes is trying to go for a little higher rake, I would have argued that that's why they were struggling a little bit in the testing, trying to get that car balanced, because that's a newer approach, or different, not newer, but a different approach for Mercedes. And maybe they've kind of got on top of that. And I think to your point, Paul, and Matt's point of having different tracks, I do think the parity between Mercedes and Red Bull will ebb and flow a little bit, track specific. As it does for most all the teams. But it isn't enough just to take that Aston Martin and dial in more rake, because you have to control that from the nose all the way through the car. So they're going to have to come up with a creative solution to how to make that lower rake work more effectively, because they're not just going to jack up the back of the car. And that's going to be difficult to do.
And where the rules are and what is not allowed to be changed.
Tweaked.
What is it? So they're just going to have to work within that. The good news is for the lower rate cars is the high rate cars are already done. So they've got some room for improvement there, but it's, that's why it's Formula One. It's going to, you get it right. If you don't get it right, then you figure out a way to fix it,
Yeah, exactly. Let's see. Next question. Brian Stiefel. I hope I'm pronouncing that right, Brian. Hi, Todd, Paul, Grace. I was wondering if you could explain the diffuser and the different direction McLaren went with theirs. Thanks. Love the show. Never miss an episode. Brian from Austin. Hey, Brian from Austin. Thanks so much for the email. Paul, what do you think? There certainly, as McLaren came in, they had a different approach to that diffuser with the strakes that come down, but theirs are more curved and looked a little more controlled as they fold underneath the car. How did you see those diffusers?
Yeah, I mean, it's more to do with how they interpreted the rules and measurements, really. It's about that central tunnel that basically is the center point of the car where the diffuser splays out, and they extended that center point so they could extend those two strakes that are right attached to that center part to make them a little larger than some of the other teams, which basically cut off their center channel of their diffuser. So they just interpreted the rules. The rule said at that point it can only be this long, so they just extended basically the back of the car a little bit to where the rear light is, so they could actually get more surface area from those two strakes coming down the center channel. So it's an interpretation of the rule that they got right, that the other teams will probably copy.
Yeah, because I haven't seen anybody protesting that.
No, I mean, there've been grumblings, but I think when they really looked at it, they saw that they just looked outside the box a little bit on how to interpret those rules. And if you move one part of the car as opposed to where everyone normally stops that rear diffuser, or the center channel that holds onto the diffuser.
Right.
That's just a very smart way of looking at it. And even though we see these little defined boxes and think no one can move outside of them, a clever job by McLaren to do it, and they're not breaking the rules, but everyone's going to have to chase them now.
Yeah, I suspect, and it's not just easy just to copy that and immediately throw it in your car, because your car was designed with the diffuser that you currently have, and sort of in order to make those changes, they'll have to go to wind tunnel and CFD and run those modifications and changes. And would it work better for our car if we did this? Would it require a new front wing? And how would we manage that? So there's a lot of components at play there, and it's not just a simple change.
Yep.
And that's why you recall several years ago when they showed up with the dual diffuser, and Braun had a dual diffuser, and I believe Williams actually had a dual diffuser.
Williams and Red Bull, I think.
And Red Bull, maybe.
Yeah.
And so they came out with a dual diffuser, and it was a game changer for Braun at the time. But teams couldn't just instantly make that change. Now, eventually they did come out with that, but there's a heck of a lot of work going on in the air department.
Some teams took half a season to jump on that bandwagon.
Right.
Yeah, that's why we saw, the Braun had such an advantage at the beginning, but halfway through the season, they were struggling to be in the top 3 at that point, right?
Right.
Everyone
They were just clinging on the points haul that they had made the first season.
Exactly.
So anyway, it's a good question, though, Brian. Appreciate that. Mr. Drury asked, do you think that Max should have given the position back right before the DRS detection zone? Could that made much difference to the outcome? And I think we talked about that, certainly, Paul, not just before the main straight DRS zone, but that third DRS zone is where you and I talked that he should have maybe seeded that position heading into that next to last DRS zone, or the last DRS zone on the track, and then seeded that position there, giving him the ability to tuck right back in that zone, and then head into the main straight DRS zone where he could have tried to deploy and get back around.
Right. I mean, they tell you to give that position. It doesn't say how or how easy you make it for him.
Right.
I mean, honestly, I think it wasn't just where he did it, but how he did it. He did it on the straightaway, and Lewis came around, tucked back in. It's like, do in the middle of a corner, do something, wave him by on the dirty side of the road. I mean, I tried to wave him by, he didn't go,
Yeah.
So I think, I think it was just, they're in the moment.
Yeah.
The team were like, just let him by, and then we'll go back and pass him again. It won't be an issue. But it ended up being a tough issue because of how well Lewis was controlling his car and how he played the race. So
and it all happened in seconds. I mean, it's easy to armchair this thing and think woulda, shoulda, coulda, and they made an error. But look, you're in the heat of the battle. It's the last laps, of a race, and you want to win it. And if you feel like you passed and it was an illegal pass, then get back behind him and give him a few laps to then make it.
You don't wait to raise laps and argue the point, because then as soon as you let him by, it pretty much is over.
Yeah.
So I understand what it was. It was just
it's, and I don't think either you or I are taking the stuffing out of Red Bull for doing it, but yes, technically speaking, had they could have frozen time into slow motion and they had time to think about it, they probably would have instructed. I mean, Red Bull's sharp team and their strategists are wickedly smart too, and I think they probably would have coached him a little different place if you could have frozen and put everything in slow motion and had time to think it through.
And you got to think, how many times have these scenarios come up in a race?
Right.
Never, right?
Yeah.
So the one time it comes up, you usually you don't get it perfect the first time, no matter what you're doing.
Yeah, probably won't happen again.
No, it won't happen again.
But I've got some patience. I got time for that, and like I said, it's easy to throw darts at them. But
I think the good news is, I think pretty much everyone's convinced that the Red Bull and the Mercedes are on par. There is going to be ebb and flow in the season, but it is going to be quite a season. So yeah, absolutely. Let's hope so. And because I think we all want to see that battle, and it was great. So kudos to Mercedes for a brilliant call. Kudos to Lewis, a sublime drive and managing those tires and holding them off. It was just a brilliant job by Mercedes. So great job to them. And kudos to Red Bull, because it looks like it's working. You showed up. Sergio is there to back you up. You're going to take that attack to Mercedes. You've shown that you've got some pace. And everything it looks, like a great season ahead of us, and let's hope it is. So, but that does it for this show, this race review. Be sure to stop by the website, theparcfermé.com. Share your opinion. Just do it with decorum and civility. Thank you so much to our Patreon supporters and the new folks who signed up to support us at the beginning of this season.
Yeah. So great to have you on board, and thank you so much. We could not and would not do this podcast if it was not for our Patreon supporters. So anyway, you are listening to this podcast by the very generous souls out there who support us on Patreon. So find them and pat them on the back and thank them for supporting this. Also, if you like the podcast, go over to iTunes, give us a good rating, give us a little love over there. We'd appreciate that. Share the podcast with your friends. If don't hoard it to yourself. If you like the podcast, spread it around. Maybe they want
buy a shirt, walk around.
Buy a shirt, buy a shirt, at our store. That would be great. So, Paul, awesome to have you on board, and I hope you're ready, because there's 23 races, now 22 this season. We're going to be busy doing race reviews.
That's going to be tough. I got 11 IMSA races and 23 Formula One races. That's fun, though.
Yeah, it is. It's
fun.
Great.
Yeah.
Excellent. All right. Well, until this time next week, when we find Grace and get her thoughts on the season, and we'll do this all over again. Until then, this is Todd, a.k.a. Negative Campers, saying so long.
That's it, man. Game over, man. It's game over.